Hello, welcome to Unit 2. This presentation, as you can tell from the slide, is about psychoneurology. What I'm going to do is, in this presentation, give a very brief explanation of some neurological terms. These neurological terms are essentially definitions of some of the most important parts of our neurological system. What I'd like to start with, as you can see from this picture of an individual neuron, is the soma. The soma is the cell body of a neuron that contains the nucleus of the cell and carries out the cell's metabolic functions. The cell body is responsible for all the basic processes that go on within the neuron, and the other structures are responsible for receiving, carrying, and transmitting the signals. The axon is the long portion of the nerve cell that carries messages away from the soma and to other neurons. Most but not all nerve cells contain an axon. When an axon is present within the neuron, there is never more than one. Branching is not uncommon, with most axons having at least one axon branch and others having many, even hundreds of branches from the main axon. At the terminal end of an axon or axon branch, the electrical impulse is then passed to another nerve cell via the dendrites or to or from another type of cell. A synapse is a fluid-filled gap between neurons through which neurotransmitters are sent. Synapses can be found at the points where nerve cells meet other nerve cells and where nerve cells interface with glandular and muscular cells. In all cases, this connection allows for the one-way movement of data. The human body contains trillions of synapses, and at any given time, huge numbers of these connections are active. Observe the synapses located at the red and green arrows. These are actually a few nanometers in width. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that transport neural impulses from one nerve cell to the other. Synapses cannot take place without neurotransmitters. Scientists have managed to identify over 100 neurotransmitters in the human brain. But evidence suggests that we have significantly more than this number. An unfortunate aspect of not being able to identify all neurotransmitter cells is that researchers, especially those developing medications to act on specific messenger cells, can't always determine why or how medications work or fail to work. Again, synapses are measured in nanometers, and this picture, courtesy of Wise Geek, was taken with an electron microscope. Dendrites are root-like structures at the end of axons that receive neural impulses from neighboring neurons. The dendrites are responsible for picking up information from neighboring neurons and transmitting this information to the cell body, also known as the soma. From the soma, the information is passed along the axon, another structure in the nerve cell. And the axon in turn transmits signals to the dendrites of neighboring neurons. This entire process occurs in a fraction of a second, allowing neurons to respond extremely rapidly to a wide variety of signals, from a message from the brain to take a breath to sensory input from a hand which is petting a cat. The synaptic terminal can be known as swellings at the ends of dendrites that transmit neurotransmitters and create the synapse. A neuron has a number of axon terminals. They link up with the dendrites of other neurons in the vicinity in order to transmit information from one neuron to the other. Each terminal branches off from a neuron like fingers on a hand. Electrical information travels through a neuron extremely quickly. While it is in the axon of the nerve, the signal is in the form of an electrical pulse. These pulses are very small, between 50 and 70 millivolts each. Once the electrical signal reaches the axon terminal, the information is converted into a chemical signal known as a neurotransmitter. The axon terminal then sends the chemical signal into the dendrite of the next neuron, which then converts this information back into an electrical signal and sends it down to the next neuron. Interneurons send information between sensory and motor neurons. This is the most common form of neuron. It's most commonly located in the spinal cord. An interneuron acts as a middleman between afferent or sensory neurons, which receive signals from the peripheral nervous system, and efferent or motor neurons, which transmit signals from the brain. It also connects other interneurons, allowing them to communicate with one another. Notice the synapse as illustrated in the second picture. The myelin sheath is a fatty layer of cells that insulate the axon. Nerves are like an electrical wire. Current, or the message, must be conducted along a path, the nerve, to get successfully from point A to point B. For example, from the brain to the fingertip. The electrical current must travel without being corrupted, scrambled, diverted from the proper path, or leaking energy. Therefore, myelin is like the layer of plastic insulation surrounding an interior wire, which is the nerve. Additionally, myelin speeds the conduction, so it's also analogous to a secondary coating on the wire that reduces the resistance facing an electrical current. The interior wire represents the series of axons and nerve cells that relay the electrical impulse. Nodes of Ranvier are non-insulated areas along the axon. The two biggest advantages of this sort of faster conduction are increased signal velocity and improved energy efficiency. This type of conduction is typically about 30 times faster than continuous conduction. By limiting electrical currents to the nodes of Ranvier, saltatory conduction also allows fewer ions to leak through the membrane. This ultimately saves metabolic energy, which is often a significant advantage since the human nervous system tends to use about 20% of the body's metabolic energy. Glial cells, in support of the neurons, they form the myelin sheath. One role of the glial cell is one of an insulator. A specific subtype known as the oligodendrocyte produces myelin, which protects neurons from each other and regulates the movement of signals. Glial cells, like astrocytes, offer structural support to hold neurons in position and also provide a supply of food and cleanup. As neurons produce waste, the surrounding cells remove it for processing. Other glial cells, known as microglia, can attack invading organisms and engulf dead neurons for removal. Motor neurons, or efferent neurons, convey neural impulses from the central nervous system to muscles and glands. In vertebrate animals, including humans, movement of the articulated internal skeletal structure is enabled by coordinating the contractions of many muscles attached to it. Only the brain is capable of this complex coordination, and electrical signaling is arguably the only means fast enough to deliver instructions to far-flung muscles. The medium delivery are electrically excitable cells called neurons. Sensory neurons, or afferent neurons, transmit information from sensory organs, muscles, and inner organs to the spinal cord and brain. As you can see here, there is a retinal neuron on the left and an olfactory neuron on the right. These two are sensory or afferent neurons. It is the opposite of an efferent vessel which carries substances away from these central locations. Perhaps the best known examples of these vessels are the veins of the circulatory system, which bring deoxygenated blood back toward the heart. Lymphatic vessels that bring lymphatic fluid into the lymph nodes are also known as afferents. Another example of this type of vessel are the afferent neurons, which convey sensory information to the central nervous system. Action potential is a sudden change in the polarity of a nerve cell from positive to negative or vice versa, also called a nerve impulse. When a nerve impulse is not being transmitted, the inside of the nerve cell has a negative charge, and the outside has a positive one. It is said to be in its resting state, so the potential difference at this time is the resting potential. The difference in charges is due to the amounts of ions being found inside and surrounding the cells. In the case of nerve cells, the potential difference is due to sodium and potassium ions. The refractory period is the fraction of time within which a nerve cell cannot send a signal through the axon. Periods of this type are used to identify several different situations, including the male refractory period and the period in between phases of epilepsy. During these interim periods, the individual is physiologically incapable of responding to further stimulation designed to induce the same type of outcome. A nerve is a bundle of axons from different neurons. Their official job is to conduct nerve impulses, which basically means they are responsible for delivering signals and sensations from the nerves to various parts of the body. Fibers come in three varieties called classes based on their primary goal. Class A relates to muscle and tendon movements. Class B covers involuntary impulses like digestion and lung movement. And Class C is responsible for pain and temperature sensations. The speed of transmission varies between the classes, and there can also be slight differences in the transmission in the fiber length and thickness depending upon location and precise role. All fibers have the same overarching role, though they tend to work in about the same way. If you are interested in references for your own use, please do ask for a copy of them. I can have them emailed to you. And thank you for watching this video.